Welcome back to the Colorado Springs Business Podcast. My name is Andrew Hasley, and I am the host of the show. Today, we are sponsored by the Colorado Springs Business Podcast. If you'd like me to read a 15 to 30 second ad script about your business at the beginning of every episode, please reach out to the Colorado Springs Business Podcast at cosbusinesspodcast@gmail.com. And we also have a Patreon account if you'd like to become a member of the Patreon. We have certain bonus content that we'll be releasing exclusively on the Patreon account. One of the bonus content is an episode at the end of every month where I do a solo episode and review everything that I've learned from all the guests of that month. And that's just a little extra content and also an extra way for this show to make money. And so I also run a video production business called Behemoth Visuals. And I figured, I have no ads at the beginning. I might as well be promoting my business. So I run a video production company, and we create videos for businesses that really help capture their essence and help them build a deeper connection and automate certain processes within their business using video and storytelling. So yeah, that's Behemoth Visuals, and you can check them out, us out. They actually do this studio space is actually leased out to Behemoth Visuals. So it technically is brought to you by Behemoth Visuals. All right, so I'm going to introduce the guest. Today we have on Robin Roberts with Pikes Peak. I want to throw the national in there. I don't know why.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Pikes Peak National Bank.
Okay, sweet. I didn't want to say it wrong. So could you tell us in a sentence or two what you do for that business?
I'm the president and CEO,
Nice.
so I solve problems all day long. But I run the bank. I'm responsible for everything that happens in the bank. And I work with a great team of people to serve customers and help them reach financial prosperity.
Sweet. I can't wait to get into that in the episode. And I'm going to roll the intro music. This is a show where we have real conversations with entrepreneurs and business owners who are mostly in Colorado Springs, doing things in the community of Colorado Springs. Robin, how's it going?
Great.
Yeah, that intro music, I love it.
I love it. Nice job.
Thank you. It's actually updated from the one we just heard. The one that the listeners will be hearing is a little bit different. I changed it to mostly in Colorado Springs, business owners mostly in Colorado Springs, because I do want it to grow to a different level, a bigger level, to expand, to have guests on outside of Colorado Springs as well. But it's going to be mostly about business owners in Colorado Springs. But I feel like the lessons we learn in the show can be applied to business across the globe. So yeah. And I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. I think I've done that on like 3 episodes so far. Yeah. So let's talk about your how you got to the CEO position a little bit. I want to learn a little bit about that. I also want to learn about what your bank, what your business does, and all the typical things that you'd get about like what makes you different and all the challenges and struggles. And we'll get into all of that. But let's start out with, I guess, your journey to getting to where you are right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, I left college to join the military.
Okay.
So I was active duty Army for 2 enlistments, 6.5 years. And my ex-husband was also in the military. We met, we had 2 boys. And so for him and me both to be active duty, it was difficult. And so I got out at the end of my enlistment.
I'm going to fix your mic real quick.
Okay.
It'll cut you off if you go too far.
Okay.
So I keep hearing it drop a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
All right, cool. We can push it farther if you want. I'll let you adjust it.
No, that's fine. I'll just.
Yeah, sorry.
Anyways, I got out of the military when my second enlistment was up, and he was Ranger, Special Forces. We ended up here in Colorado Springs because he was with a station at 10th Group. And we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina before this, and I got into banking there.
Okay.
We went from Fort Lewis to Fort Bragg, and there was a bank there that was a regional bank that was starting in-store branches, the ones that are in grocery stores. They didn't have those in North Carolina at that time. And those are primarily sales-oriented, very transactional, retail-focused branches for any bank. They are convenience. They're focused on convenience with retail hours.
Yes.
And so I spent I didn't know anything about banking, but they hired me because of my military experience, and they just taught me how to be a banker.
Yeah.
And they made me the branch manager. And I didn't know anything about banking just because of my military experience as well.
Okay.
So I did that for 3 years, and then we moved here, and we wanted to buy a house. And I got on with Pikes Peak just because of a networking. You know, the best jobs, you don't learn about them. You learn about them from friends and referrals, and that's how I got the job at Pikes Peak. And started there in 1999. So I've been there for 21 years.
Oh, nice.
And I took a pay cut and a demotion to come on to the bank. But we were trying to buy a house, and I needed a pay stub to show the mortgage company. And things just kind of fell into place. The owner of the bank at the time was a World War II vet. And there's not a lot of veterans in commercial banking, veterans in investment advisor and financial advising, but it's not a normal transition to go from active duty military to banking. And so he was a World War II vet, and we spoke the same language. People who were in the military, we speak the same language.
For sure.
So he really just loved that I'd been in the military. And so as doors opened, in any organization that you're in, opportunities present themselves, maybe not as quickly as you want, but if you're patient and do your best all the time, those doors are going to open. And because of my military experience, he kept opening. I mean, he let me go through those doors. And ultimately, you know, I went from branch manager to the vice president over the lending area, then senior vice president. And then in 2003, he asked me to be the president of the bank. And I was the president until 2018 when the bank sold to our current owner.
Okay.
And he made me the CEO. And
what's the difference between president and CEO?
In banking, if you're a president or a CEO, you're an executive officer, and you're required by law to be on the board of directors. And there's just a higher fiduciary level of expectation because it's an FDIC insured institution. So regulatory-wise, there's a higher expectation. So some banks have a president and CEO, which is what I am now. Some banks have that separated. The president is one executive officer and the CEO is another. And companies do the same thing. So I was the president for all those years, and the owner of the bank's son was the CEO until they sold the bank, and then the new owner just made me president and CEO.
So how does a business model for a bank even work? That seems like so foreign to me.
Well, I mean, banks sell money, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about it.
They sell money, and banks operate off that spread. That's where their profit lies, is the spread.
So they're like investors in a sense.
Kind of. I mean, we make loans to individuals and we make loans to businesses, but we don't own any percentage of the business that we make the loan to.
Okay.
But we do, particularly in business lending, we do a lot of due diligence on that business before we're making a loan to them. So we take in deposits from the community, and those, in return for putting their deposits with the bank, they are insured through the FDIC. And then we loan those deposits out, and the interest rate that we make, that spread over our cost of those deposits is where the profit is made in a general sense. I mean, it can get more complicated, and there's a lot of different products and services that banks offer, but that's the basic.
Do you guys specialize in businesses or do personal loans or?
We do personal loans, but our specialty is small business lending. We're a small business ourselves. I mean, our bank is $110 million in assets. That's considered a small bank. We have 4 branches. We're only in El Paso County right now. And so our focus is lending to small businesses in our community. And all of our deposits come from our community as well. So our depositors are putting their money in our bank, and then we are loaning it out to families and businesses in our community. So that's, in banking, we call that a community bank.
Yes.
And there are lots of different sizes of banks. I mean, there's the big 5. Everyone knows who they are. They're national size banks, but also they're in other countries as well. So they're more global banks too. And then there's regional banks that cover several different states. And then there's small community banks, of which we have several in our community. Those banks give a lot to our community. They sponsor a lot of events. their employees are out volunteering. And then the community returns that by putting their deposits with community banks and getting loans through us.
Sweet. And so the deposit amount kind of acts as a buffer, kind of, or the deposits that you guys have, you guys are able to use that money to lend. And so how does a business go bad with the bank?
What do you mean?
I'm just interested, like, what if you obviously probably won't loan out all the money because then no one can withdraw it. Yeah, how does that work?
You mean, how does the bank go bad, or?
Yeah, the bank. Yeah, like, does that happen?
Oh, yeah. During the recession, which was only 12 years ago.
Oh, yes.
We saw a lot of banks close, and other banks, a lot of banks, under regulatory scrutiny for sure, because the economy was so bad. So banks are going to feel it when the economy goes south, because they've made loans to so many businesses and families, and those businesses and families are negatively affected by the economic circumstances. So you're going to see that go through the banking industry 100%. Banks that go bad, usually there's some, banks that close, there's a management issue. Possibly they went too much into a certain kind of industry that they loan to. Banks are businesses, and so we all make loans and we all take deposits, but we make loans in areas that we have expertise, or where the bank specifically has a lot of knowledge about that. So, some banks do a lot of real estate lending, residential mortgage lending, or commercial real estate lending. Some banks only do small business administration guaranteed loans. That's their specialty. So banks have their niches. Even if they're larger banks, they still have areas that they really just feel comfortable lending because they have expertise there. So, but if they go all in on one specific thing, there's a lot of risk involved in that too. So
that's for anyone doing any kind of thing.
Any industry, any business. And so if you're not diversifying, it can be a problem. But in the recession, we saw banks that did a lot of residential mortgage lending have problems, because that sector of the economy was really in a bad way. And
there was some bad things that they were doing. So
yeah, there was some fraud.
Yeah.
Anytime there's fraud involved, you're probably going to have some issues in your bank. Fraud risk is a huge risk in banking. It's a huge risk in any business, but definitely is in banking. So yeah, you can see banks end up closing if they run out of funding. They loan out 100% of their deposits. That can be tough for them. But most banks all banks are regulated. We're visited by our regulators on a regular basis. So, banks have good management. They have good, strong capital levels right now. We're in a pandemic.
Yes.
So we are going to see and feel some of that in the banking industry probably next year, not right now, because there's a lot of government aid and assistance in the system right now. So it's helping businesses.
Yes, it is.
But ultimately, that will go away, and banks will have some issues probably in their loan portfolios. But that's what happens with banks, is just like any business, bad management decisions, maybe some fraud involved, not a diversification in their customer base, that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
So if someone was to want to start a business and get a business loan, what are some of the key things that you want them to have? Yeah,
it's lots of people, startups can have a hard time getting bank financing. Some banks have policies of you've got to be in business for 2 years before we'll even look at you. And really what the banks are looking at is some kind of history and cash flow, a proof of cash flow, which is tax returns, generally speaking. But there are a lot of options for startups. One option is to do something that's guaranteed through the Small Business Administration, so a SBA loan. Another thing is to work with maybe a nonprofit lender, like Colorado Enterprise Fund or DreamSpring. I always recommend any new business owner to start at the Small Business Development Center.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the Small Business Development Center, that's a network actually that's across the country. But in Colorado, we have 14 Small Business Development Centers, SBDCs. And here, the one we have in Colorado Springs is the Pikes Peak Small Business Development Center. They're located in the Catalyst campus. And the SBDC has classes, low cost, sometimes free classes on how to write a business plan, how to use QuickBooks, how to market your business. And then there's free one-on-one consulting with experts in, I'm a consultant. I've been a volunteer consultant there for 10 years.
Okay.
But there are lawyers, accountants, SEO specialists, HR people. I mean, we have like 40 consultants at the SBDC.
And if you go through all that stuff, are you more likely to get a loan?
I think you're more prepared.
Okay.
Especially because you're going to need a business plan to get a loan for a new business.
Yes.
And that's daunting for a lot of people.
Yes.
But actually that process, going through the process of your business plan is more important than the actual document, I think,
for sure.
At the end of it. Sure, you have to show the document to the lender, but you going through the process
builds the confidence too. It makes you feel, it also gets you excited, I think.
Yes, exactly. And it validates what you think. Like you're like, oh, I know this is going to be a good business. And then you go through the business planning process and you're validating it with market research and looking at the competition and looking how what your special value is going to be. And you're validating your business idea. You're doing some financial projections showing that you're going to make money. And if you go through that process and it's not working out, then you've saved yourself a lot of money and heartache and time and investment. But if you go through that process and you're validating what you think, then you take that to the lender. So business planning is having a business plan is really important. People don't know where to start a lot of times, and I say you start at the Small Business Development Center for sure.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. A lot of times when you're wanting to start a business, you think you don't have a realistic idea of what it can do. And some of the ways you can figure out realistic ideas is figuring out what are some of these other companies, what does their market share look like, or it helps you get some real numbers too. Like you can take the population of Colorado Springs if you're only doing it in Colorado Springs, minus, put some variables in there and
yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of new business owners don't understand also a huge free resource we have here, which is the Pikes Peak Library District. They have databases that you can access for free. I don't even know that you have to have a library card in order to do it, and library cards are free.
Yeah.
But they'll show you how to use these databases, and if you're looking at 2 different locations, possibilities, places to lease, you can do a database search of the demographics around those locations, what is the traffic count in front of them, what is the discretionary income level within a 3-mile radius. You can find out stuff about your competitors. It's all at the library.
That's so cool.
So if people are listening to this and they didn't realize that the library district had that capability for business owners, you just learned something new.
What is it at the library? How do you find it?
You can call, I always refer people to Terry Zarsky, who is the business librarian for the Pikes Peak Library District. She's at the Penrose Library, but you can go into any library with the library district. I don't know what their schedule is right now with COVID, but
for sure,
you can call them, go online, and some of these databases you can access just through their website as long as you have your library card to input there. So if you're working on a business or you're maybe expanding a business, maybe you're going to open a second location, you don't know where to put it, use those databases to verify or to validate what you think. Like, I think this is where we should go.
Yes.
Well, look at those databases to look at the numbers to make sure that what you think is valid.
I could and probably should look up some numbers for this podcast.
I mean, you should.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd call Terry and ask her to sit with you, make an appointment, and she can show you, tell her what you're looking for, and she'll help you.
And see, I guess figuring out what to look for is part of the battle too.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking right now, I'd have to sit down and actually think what I would want to search. I know definitely, probably population, but I mean, I would have to learn some statistics about podcasts too, and then apply those to the research, which, there's probably, I don't know my statistics on my podcast so far. I do know them. I mean, but I know they're not valid really because it's not big enough, because I get most of my views on Facebook and stuff, but the Anchor app, it has a bunch of analytics for the actual downloads of each episodes on the actual just audio versions of this podcast. And 96% male on those, and who are 23 to 27, which is what I am basically.
Yeah. So you're talking to people just like you.
Yes, exactly. Essentially, but I think that's just because of my reach right now. It hasn't really, I'm sure once I get on the news or once I get a billboard, that will balance out a lot.
Yeah.
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 I'm going to double check this real quick.
Okay.
It's been bugging me. I know it's still rolling, but I had to double check. I thought I hit the button over here. All right, we're still good.
Okay, but anyways, going back to Terry, she teaches a class called Minding Your Business, which teaches people how to use the databases and all of the different databases that the library district has.
Nice.
So,
and that's a podcast?
No, it's a class that she
class.
teaches. Again, during COVID, I don't know how that's being done.
For sure.
But in regular times, and we'll go back to that at some point.
Yeah.
She teaches that class, and she probably has some other business librarians that do as well. It's really helpful for people who are writing business plans or wanting to do something different in their business, and they want some data to back up their decisions.
Nice. So with COVID, how has that looked like for you as a bank? Have you been helping a lot of people, doing a lot of PPP loans and stuff like that?
Yes. Oh my goodness, the PPP loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unprecedented kind of loan product there from the Small Business Administration. We did do a lot of PPP loans, just like a lot of banks. It was a super stressful time for bankers.
For sure.
But also it was a really stressful time for our customers, for business owners. So all of us were just kind of learning it as we went.
Yes.
But ultimately, we and other banks helped a lot of businesses with that product. And so the first part of it is done, and now we're moving into the second part, which is the forgiveness part of it.
Yeah.
And those rules are still, I think they're kind of nebulous, but we're getting there. And maybe there will be another PPP rollout. Congress has hinted at that possibility.
What do you think about the stimulus? Are the stimulus for everyone? Do you know anything about that?
No, like the stimulus checks that you're talking. Yeah. I don't know what Congress is planning on doing. I don't know that they know what they're planning on doing. Yeah. I think it would help the business community and families if they could have some kind of expectation of what they're going to receive or can receive as part of a stimulus package. There's no
expectation at all right now.
Exactly.
It's like up in the air, and it's weird because we've been promised it multiple times. So it's kind of hard to promise something and then not go up and not do it.
Well, one thing we have learned in business over the years is when conditions are uncertain, then businesses really can't make decisions to invest in their future. And so then investment in businesses kind of stops until they get some idea of what the government's going to do. And I think we're sitting in that space. So
you guys are getting less interest back right now. You guys are making less money. Is that the case?
I don't know about that. What's different with the pandemic versus 12 years ago when we were in the recession is that there are still businesses who are doing very well right now.
Yeah.
The construction industry is
Some of them
great.
are even doing better because of the switch of demand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Landscaping companies doing great.
Sanitizing, cleaning companies
doing well. And then, of course, we're seeing the residential real estate market is just unbelievable.
Yeah, right and now. That was a surprise for me, at least. I thought it was going to go the other way.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of took a little dip while everything was closed, and then it just, there was no stopping it. So there are a lot of businesses that are doing well or even better than they were doing last year. And so the funding demands from them are still in place. You have the other side of it where you've got retailers, restaurants, hospitality that have been suffering, are going to continue to suffer a little bit.
And some of them are probably having to, what do they call that when you can't pay your loan?
Defer.
Yeah.
Some of them, banks have really stepped up and worked with their customers, and anybody with a Small Business Administration guarantee loan, they've had deferrals because the SBA just immediately did that.
Yes.
So lending institutions, banks, and then of course the government has put some guidelines in place of no foreclosures, no evictions. Okay. That has protected people as well.
For sure. And wasn't that supposed to end in August?
I think so, but I saw something from the CDC yesterday saying that that they didn't want it.
That's
saying
good.
you shouldn't do any evictions.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that's complicated.
Yeah, and I was the opposite when it came to that. I got a space downtown, and like those were two spots that probably like people weren't really wanting to open businesses downtown right now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I guess I'm one of the outliers with that.
I think there always is that though, because I don't care what kind of economy you're in, there's always opportunity.
Yes.
There's always entrepreneurial focused people who are solving problems.
Yes.
And in any economy, there are problems to be solved. The problems look different.
And when recessions and downturns happen, there's more problems to be solved.
Exactly. There's still people. When I started at the Small Business Development Center as a volunteer consultant, I came in 2010. They brought me in to help businesses who were suffering talk with their banks, because maybe their banks were pulling their line of credit or were foreclosing on their property or whatever. And they needed help dealing with their bank and understanding why their bank was doing what they were doing. And I understood why they were doing it. And
you kind of got to be able to see it from the inside.
yeah, I was like this little translator.
Yeah.
Well, this is why the bank is doing what they're doing, and here's how you should approach it, and here's some options. And that was pretty depressing. You're dealing with people who are losing a lot. But then I'd still meet with people who were coming in, hey, I want to open this business. I need a business plan. So there were these people who were still entrepreneurial.
Yes.
You had both sides of it. And we have both sides of that right now as well. So
For sure. So as a CEO of a bank, what do you think are some of your biggest challenges with that position?
It depends on the economy, certainly, and the state of the economy and the state of the employment base. But your employees are always going to be your biggest challenge, not them individually as people, but how do you create an environment that supports them, that provides professional development and career development, that helps with retention, that gives your customers, it gives them the desire to really provide care for your customers. I'd say that's my number one challenge is how do we take care of our team? How do we stay in front of how organizational culture is changing? Because we're going to see huge changes. We're already seeing changes out of COVID, but we're going to see huge changes on employee expectations, how businesses look inside, the process with the customer. So that's staying on top of that, I think, is always my biggest challenge. And then probably secondarily to that is how do you continue to support your customers? How do you continue to invest in technology, invest in products and services to deliver to them a customer experience that serves your mission, which is to support financial prosperity? That's a challenge. I mean, we're in a technologically changing environment all the time.
Yes.
And we're dealing with people's money and a lot of personal information that has to be protected. So it's a risk management and product management. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably my second biggest challenge.
So have you owned any of your own businesses?
I have my own business, which is a business coaching business.
Oh, nice.
But I focus primarily on helping business owners understand their financial statements. I found through banking and also through my volunteer work at the Small Business Development Center that understanding financial statements is really uncomfortable for business owners. They outsource that to their bookkeeper, to their accountant. But that's really not, you can outsource the process, but you can't outsource the responsibility. You've got to know your financial state. And business owners should know what a profit and loss statement is and know what a balance sheet is and know how to read them because there's a lot of opportunities in looking at those all the time. And so successful business owners look at their financial statements.
They know their numbers.
They know their numbers. My friend at Red Lake Brewing Company, Todd Baldwin, says, the numbers don't lie, you only lie to yourself. And he's absolutely right. Like you can just pretend that that stuff doesn't exist, but successful business owners are looking at that all the time.
I can shamefully say that I am kind of just pushing it off.
I don't think you should feel bad about that. A lot of business owners, they're good at their business. So if you're a plumber and you're really good at that trade, financials is probably not your specialty, but part of owning a business is taking accountability and responsibility for your financial state. Because if you don't know your finances, one, you're probably not reaching your full potential.
Yes.
You're not taking opportunities that possibly you could and grow and make more money. And you could be missing money.
Yeah.
I mean, at the bank, we see it all the time where businesses have been embezzled from, usually by someone that they just can't believe that ever happened.
Their brother-in-law or...
It's always a family, not always a family member, but I'd say 90% of the time it's a family member or a very close friend or long-time employee. And then, they've never looked at a bank statement. They've had that person take care of everything. And then all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of dollars are missing.
And what do you do about that? Can you do anything about that?
Well, the bank can't really do much about that.
Yeah, not you specifically. But
yeah, but a business owner can do a lot. They can prevent that by, one, looking at their bank statements, for sure.
That's preventative. I'm talking about, is there any action you could take? I guess you could probably go to court, but then that's a big headache.
Oh, after the fact, yes. They usually go to court, and by that time, the money is long gone. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like maybe you can get some satisfaction out of a criminal conviction or something, but the money is usually gone by that time. So it's really best to be on the front end of that and not allow it to happen by putting processes in place where you're looking at your bank statements, you're looking at your bank account, you're looking at your financials.
Should you be doing that every day?
It depends on the business. I'd say at least once a week, business owners should, and absolutely once a month. At the end of the month, they should be looking at their P&L and balance sheet and looking at the trends of their revenues, looking at the trends of their net profit, looking at their expenses. Are they where they thought they should be? And once you learn what a P&L and a balance sheet is and what you're looking at, you only have to learn that once.
Okay.
Because it's used across the industry.
Yes.
And in any business, you're going to have a P&L and balance sheet.
Okay, so do you want to give us a brief overview of that? The P&L, I'm sure that could probably be a long conversation in itself.
I mean, I could give a really brief overview.
Yeah.
A profit and loss statement is a statement that's showing your revenues and your cost of goods sold, if your business has that, and then your operating expenses. So your rent, your utilities, your payroll expenses, that kind of stuff. And at the bottom is your profit or your loss for whatever reporting period.
So it's a profit or a loss, not profit and a loss?
It's called a profit and loss statement, but it's a profit or loss. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you might see a loss on that bottom line. Hopefully you're seeing a profit. And it depends on the reporting period. Is it for a month? Is it for a whole year? You can print those out of your QuickBooks very easily. You can do that in about a minute.
Yes.
So if you're taking care, if you have a bookkeeper that's inputting all of your stuff in QuickBooks, you can look at those all the time. And then your balance sheet is what your company owns and what your company owes. And the difference between those two, obviously, is the equity that's in your company. And that's just a very simplified version of what a balance sheet is. But your cash position, any accounts receivable, your inventory, your buildings and improvements that you've made to buildings that you lease, those are all assets. And then liabilities are payroll liabilities and credit cards and loans and mortgages that your business might have. So the two together, you use those two together, and banks are going to ask you for those. If you have a loan, or if you're asking for a loan, they're going to ask you for a profit and loss in the balance sheet. So I don't care if you're just a one-person business, you should have a P&L and balance sheet. It's just a fundamental of business. It's uncomfortable at first, but that's where the growth is when you step into that discomfort. And successful business owners know how to look at their P&L and balance sheet. They don't shy away from it.
Well, I gotta start focusing on that.
Okay, I'll help you.
Awesome. What about taxes? Do you think someone should do their own taxes?
I think it depends on the business. I think that a small solopreneur can probably do their own taxes if they are doing their own QuickBooks. If they're keeping track of their stuff in QuickBooks, I think that they can probably do their own taxes. But anything that's where you have an employee or a lot of assets for the business, I think you really should be using an accountant because they know all of the benefits that you can have. And you might, I mean, I'm not an accountant. I don't know all of the benefits that I get as a business owner. And that's what an accountant is trained to do. So you might be paying too much in taxes if you're not using an accountant who can help you with depreciation, expense, and any benefits that you get for accelerating that, for example, or whatever.
Yeah, I've been doing like my own taxes, like not for my business, but also for my business. But before my business, I was always using TurboTax. Yeah. And in 2015, I didn't realize I was on one side of the line of a city, because I'm from Kansas City. There's Independence in Kansas City, and like the street that I lived on was like in Kansas City, and the street over was Independence, and I didn't even consider it, but I was supposed to be paying taxes to Kansas City, and I thought I was in Independence. So they didn't hit me up until last year. I think it's because I started a business, and like, you know, I triggered something in the system. They didn't hit me up until last year, and I didn't even know that I didn't have that. But it was like only like $500, but it went up to like $1,500. They waited 5 years to tell me.
Oh, all the penalties and interest and everything. Yeah, see, that's the benefit of having an accountant is they kind of protect you from that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you're an individual and you're filing your own personal taxes and all you get is a W-2, then, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't do your own taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people just are not numbers people.
Yeah,
and if that's the case, then you should have some H&R Block do it or whoever. I think it depends on where your skill set lies.
For sure. I mean, yeah, doing it through TurboTax it still takes about 40 minutes, you know, to go through everything. It's still a process, and you're hitting the buttons, but it's like
they walk you through
it.
Yeah.
And they also give you like hints and ideas, like make sure you check this. Did you do this? You can get more money back if you do this. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I love it. Yeah. So, was there anything that you specifically wanted to promote on this episode?
I mean, I just always like to let people know that the bank does help startups. You know, Pikes Peak National Bank does help startups, and it's hard for startups, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode. It's hard for startups to get bank loans, and really, when you're looking at different options of funding for a business, bank loans are the least expensive. Okay. They're just, the rates are better.
Yes.
There are a lot of options, and some options that are more expensive are the best option depending on the situation.
And but sometimes there's investors, and those guys usually want a stake.
They want ownership. You know, they're putting capital in, and in return, you're giving them ownership of your company. And the bank's not taking ownership. They just want you to repay the principal with interest. And so it's hard for startups sometimes to get bank loans, but it is the preferred way. And so there are ways that startups can get bank loans. One, with a Small Business Administration guarantee. Two, we can use products like the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, CHAFA, has small business programs like the Cash Collateral Program, where if you don't have enough of a down payment, they put cash in the bank and we hold it as collateral for your loan. We use that. The bank uses that all the time.
Awesome.
For some of the startup lending that we do. And so our customers are getting to start their business. They're using a bank, so the rates are good. And we've partnered with a government agency to provide just a little bit more support so the bank feels better about the risk that they're taking.
Nice.
So we do that. A lot of our startups are done for veterans. It's not that we're focusing on that. It just tends, given that we're in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, there's a lot of veterans out here.
There's a lot of veterans. And so we tend to do startups for veterans who are startup loans for veterans who are starting businesses. And I love seeing that just because I'm a veteran. So
no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that they deserve it.
Of course they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we can start wrapping up this episode.
Great.
This has been the Colorado Springs Business Podcast, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.